Let me start the lecture. The theme of this training course is photography. Photographs are one of the most important tools used for various situations at cultural heritage conservation sites. There are many kinds of cultural heritage, but in this lecture, we aim to share our understanding of the role of photography in the protection of architectural heritage. Of course, technical knowledge of how to take a picture is indispensable for photography, but especially when targeting something like cultural heritage, which has its basis in the recognition of people's values, being aware of the question, for what purpose do we take a picture, is important before we consider photographic techniques. In this lecture, I would like to take up the topic of photographic documentation of heritage buildings by dividing it into three aspects. The first is to make a record of information on architectural heritage, that is, documentation. Second, we will look at the types of surveys for assessing the value of architectural heritage and how the stage of documentation relates to each type of survey. Third, I will close this lecture by explaining the basic points of how to take pictures suitable for architectural heritage documentation. For the finer details of how to take pictures, the professional photographers Mr. Sugimoto and Mr. Nakamura will be the instructors. Then, starting with the first item, let us take a detailed look at what is architectural heritage documentation. To document something, you first need to know the characteristics of the subject, in this case, architectural heritage. One of the characteristics of architectural heritage is that it comes in various forms. For example, various genres exist, such as temples and castles, single structures as with most dwellings, compound structures made up of smaller and larger components like factories and office buildings. Plus, there are bridges and other urban infrastructure that are civil engineering structures and so forth. Next, within the same genre of architectural heritage, there are items that are built in a variety of sizes. For example, religious buildings vary in size from small regional places of worship on the one hand to large headquarters of a sect on the other. Looking at shop architecture, there are retail stores in our daily living environment, through to shopping malls that attract customers from wide areas. Finally, there are differences in the time stored within architectural heritage. For example, many monumental structures are intended to stop time at a certain point, and in houses occupied over the generations, the lifestyles of each generation are layered in the renovations and extensions of the buildings. There are also buildings reused for purposes other than the original intent, such as a former power plant that becomes a museum. The above are the main characteristics of architectural heritage. Accordingly, in order to properly protect and pass down architectural heritage, first, correctly sort out and assess the building's heritage value in terms of its spatial and temporal spans. Keeping those data accessible to people as basic heritage information. This becomes the indispensable task, and the work done for this purpose and the results are documentation. To summarize the above, what is architectural heritage documentation? It is to recognize the relevant buildings, facilities, and townscapes as cultural heritage. To evaluate what aspects have value as cultural heritage, and summarize those values using a common mode of expression so that they can be shared by the people. In the common mode of expression, there are already agreed upon specifications or formats. They summarize background factors such as location and history, and the assessed value of the architectural heritage candidate in the form of documents. Then, physical information about the shape, dimensions, and materials recorded as drawings. In addition, visual and spatial information are objectively recorded as photographs. Documentation is a mode for keeping necessary information, composed of these three items as a set. Taking up this method with an example of a single building in response to a question such as, what is the appeal of this architecture? Who built it? When? For what purpose? What other work did the people involved in its construction do? Is the architectural design good? Is it a well thought out structure? How has it been used so far? A document is a summary of the assessment of a building's appeal to its cultural heritage value, analysing the various information concerning its relation to local society, such as for a clock tower that has become the symbol of a town. On the other hand, a building is naturally a three-dimensional object, so drawings are suitable for physical and spatial representation. Photographs are also suitable for expressing visual characteristics and conveying architectural features. In other words, the format of the three items of document, drawing, and photograph as a set in heritage documentation is based on the document that is the recognition of heritage value, and uses images in the form of drawings and photographs. And this has become established as the most effective expression of the appeal of architectural heritage in a concise and effective manner. Here's a quick look at the cameras used for photographs in architectural heritage documentation. As I will explain later, heritage documentation can be divided into the three levels shown on the horizontal axis, and the cameras used can be divided into the three types shown on the vertical axis. In simple surveys of architectural heritage, using smartphones that are now very popular and have excellent automatic adjustment functions can be effective. A compact camera is also effective. If you are considering using the photos for more extensive investigation, use a compact camera if possible. Regarding single-lens reflex cameras, for the simple survey stage, it seems a bit difficult to ask everyone involved in the survey to have one and be able to use it. Even at the stage of detailed investigation, smartphones are convenient for taking pictures in the field of what you want to keep track of, and as recording equipment for making memos in various situations. The 360-degree camera, recently becoming widespread, is also a very effective device for survey recording. However, taking a photo of sufficient quality for print publication in a report, etc., is very difficult even with a high-performance smartphone. Such photos should be taken at least with a compact camera, with awareness of what they will be used for. Further, it is best to have someone knowledgeable about cameras take photos with a single lens reflex camera for publication use as much as possible. Smartphone photos are not suitable for uses such as designations of cultural heritage. There are various reasons, but because the smartphone camera's functions are not flexible, they cannot be suitably adjusted to the situations presented by architectural heritage. Depending on the model, some compact cameras have functions and performance suitable for the required quality, but it is better to use a single lens reflex camera if possible. Accordingly, in surveys for designation, etc., it is necessary to have someone knowledgeable about cameras participate and take at least the most important photos with a single lens reflex camera. If possible, request a photographer who has experience with architectural heritage to take the photos. Now, let's move on to the second item: types of heritage surveys and documentation. As mentioned earlier, when looking at types of cameras, architectural heritage surveys can be roughly divided into 3 types according to the purpose. The first is a comprehensive survey to ascertain the existence of a certain type of architectural heritage. Examples include a survey to check for the existence of traditional old folk houses in a development area prior to the start of construction, and a survey to ascertain the survival of industrial heritage on a nationwide scale. The second is an individual survey to clarify the value of a particular example of architectural heritage. An example is an academic investigation of a particular historic building or historic urban district. The third is a designation survey to find out whether the criteria for protection as a cultural heritage item are met. Examples include surveys by specialists for national or local, that is, by prefectural or city, designation, or for World Heritage registration. Let's take a closer look at each of the above 3 types of architectural heritage surveys. In general, a comprehensive survey is conducted mainly by the Cultural Heritage Protection Administrative Agency that has jurisdiction over a certain area. The survey method often consists of 2 stages: a primary survey, which is a simple survey, and a secondary survey, which is a detailed survey. In this case, in the primary survey, the surveying agency requests local governments, such as towns and villages within the jurisdiction, to cooperate in the survey, and heritage specialists of each local government conduct the survey according to the common survey form provided by the surveying agency. In this way, in the primary survey, the work of surveying a wide area is divided among many local heritage specialists, so in order to gather highly accurate information in the survey. It is important that each local heritage specialist shares in a common understanding of the contents of the survey form and how to complete it. The survey forms completed by the local heritage specialists are collected by the surveying agency, and the contents are processed and analysed. Properties that are considered to have particularly high value are selected as architectural heritage candidates. This is the main purpose of conducting the primary survey. The secondary survey is a field survey conducted by the surveying agency for each heritage candidate selected during the primary survey stage. Since this survey targets individual buildings, it is basically the same survey method as the individual survey described later, but differs in the necessity to conduct multiple surveys over a wide area within a limited time. In addition, the surveying agency often does not have sufficient personnel to assign to each individual field survey. In some cases, only a single investigator may be responsible for a particular candidate property. It is important to consider and prepare in advance the documentation method according to the planned survey period, the number of surveys, and the number of surveyors. Let's take a closer look at the individual survey. An individual survey is a field survey of architectural heritage considered particularly high in value, and is ideally conducted by a team of architectural heritage survey experts. The team is in charge of overseeing the entire survey as the coordinator of the investigation and the preparation of the report. Also, it is in charge of the measured drawings to record the physical shape of the building. Basically, there are 3 groups for photography to record the spatial and visual information of the building. For this, it is efficient if the person in charge of measured drawings works with an assistant, and the more people sharing the work, the faster the drawings can be done. So, adding relatively inexperienced surveys to make a team of about 4 is ideal. It is also efficient to have an assistant in addition to the photographer for photography. So, we want to work in pairs if possible. As the chief grasps the overall image of the building through preparing the record, the chief may instruct other investigators to make additional measured drawings or photos as needed. In particular, in the secondary part of a comprehensive survey, if the investigators rotate the roles of chief and heads of the drawing and photo teams, the burden can be distributed. But, as mentioned earlier, in some cases a single investigator has to do everything. Therefore, from the perspective of conducting a high-quality individual survey, it is important for the organisation that each investigator try to improve their skills related to architectural heritage documentation in a well-balanced manner. Finally, I will talk about the designation survey. A designation survey is a field survey of architectural heritage for the designation and registration of cultural heritage, and assesses the value and protection status of cultural heritage based on the results of an individual survey. The explainer will give a general explanation of the background of the construction of the building, its characteristics, status of modification, etc., according to the report of the individual survey. The investigator checks if there are any problems in light of the criteria for designation or registration. Also, making sure there are no missing data on the cultural heritage value and protection status. The investigator may instruct the explainer to provide additional information if needed. As additional data that may be requested, there could be investigation of unclear aspects. For example, the drawings may be insufficient, or photos that convey the heritage value. Of these, photographs that convey value are particularly important in decisions about designation and registration. Simply put, the visual impression of a photo can affect the outcome of the review. Therefore, in designation surveys, it is wise to request the services of a photographer who specializes in photographing architectural heritage, at least for photographs that symbolize the architectural heritage. From here, I would like to take a closer look at the final item: how to take pictures suitable for architectural heritage documentation. First, let's briefly summarize the quality and quantity of photos required for each level of survey we have seen so far. First of all, what kind of photos and how many will be needed in the primary stage of a comprehensive survey? In general, photographs of the exterior and characteristic rooms that well present the shape of the item. You will need about 2 to 4 photos that will fit into the survey form. As an example of a survey form, this shows a format using both sides of a single A4 sheet. The survey form begins with basic information, such as name and location, date of construction, usage, plus notes on data gathered by the investigator, including floor plans and sketches as needed, and information about the survey, such as the date and name of the investigator. Then, a few photos of the current condition of the building. Include explanations of photos as needed. Next, photos used in the comprehensive survey's secondary and individual surveys. It is necessary to take photos of the entire exterior, of every room, and of characteristic details, etc., covering all of the building's value as assessed in the survey. The number of photos required depends on the scale of the subject and the time spent on the survey, but about 20 to 40 photos per building is a rough guide. The photographs taken in the secondary survey and the individual survey are an important component of the survey report. Since the report of the comprehensive survey deals with dozens of items, the number of pages per report is usually about 2 to 4 pages. The individual explanations for each item are the same as for the survey form, with basic information, explanations, drawings, etc. Then, it has sets of photos covering 3 points. Due to the limited number of pages, there will be up to about 8 photos per page, and it is necessary to select a good balance of photos, giving the overall image and clearly showing the characteristics of the heritage. On the other hand, in the report for an individual survey, since it can be for only one item, there are basically no restrictions such as the number of pages. You can also have pages for photos only, and devote enough pages for the photos to be large and attractive. Finally, in the designation survey, photos that convincingly convey the heritage value of the item. It is important to prepare only photos that allow the overall image of the property to be grasped at a glance. In the case of a single building, about 4 photos of the exterior and 1 of each major room is a good guide. The photos from the designation survey will be used in the file submitted for consideration for designation or registration. Among materials in the designated candidate's file, photos are what almost all judges pay attention to first. It is very important as the first impression of the consideration to convey the value of the heritage well with photographs. From here, I will focus on the 3 points of position, angle of view, and amount of light as the basics of taking photographs. First of all, regarding the position, it is fundamental to shoot from where the subject, in this case the shape of the building, can be clearly understood. Buildings are often partly obscured by people. Wait for people to move or have them stand back while taking pictures. In such cases, having an assistant helps you to shoot smoothly. The same applies when a car or object obscures the building. In such cases, at least try to avoid shooting from a position where the car or object takes a large part of the photo. It is better if you can move the car or object to a position that does not appear in the picture. In such cases, again, you can proceed with shooting smoothly if you are working with an assistant. Avoid shooting from a position where the subject is obscured by surrounding trees or buildings. Try to find another position where there are no obstacles as much as possible and shoot. Depending on the type of obstacle and the situation, you may be able to take a good picture. But you may be able to take a better picture just by changing your position a little. It is important to always be aware of proper positioning with respect to the subject. Shooting positions may be limited depending on the obstacles, but try to find a position that can capture the shape of the subject as best as possible. Next, let's look at the angle of view, that is, the span that actually appears in the image. When photographing a building, capturing the shape of the subject in a single shot is basic. In other words, letting someone understand and see the entire building. When shooting the exterior, keep in mind that the height, width, and depth should be as clear as possible. For example, if you pay attention to the main part of the building. Portions, such as the tower and carport, may be partly missing. So it is not a very good photo of the building's exterior. Also, if you focus your attention on the front of the building, you may get a good photo of the front, but you can't see the depth. So it's wise to take separate photos of the exterior. In architectural heritage, in many cases, the front is distinctive and is photographed as representative. But caution is needed about pointing the camera upward when close to the subject. There is nothing wrong with looking up when taking a photo of a detail, but it is not suitable for photos of the exterior as a whole because the vertical lines become distorted and the correct shape of the building is not clear. To take a picture of the front exterior, keep some distance from the subject and take the photo as horizontally as possible from a stepladder. Shooting from a high position gets closer to the correct shape of the building. If you use appropriate equipment, such as a low distortion lens, a tripod, and mobile scaffolding, you can take a picture that shows the overall correct shape of the building. If you use a perspective control shift lens, you can take similar pictures from the ground near the building. However, using such equipment requires considerable knowledge and preparation. We have looked thus far at exterior photos, which are basic. For interior shooting as well, the basic aim of conveying the building shape in one photo remains the same. In other words, you want to let someone understand and imagine the entire room. When shooting, keep in mind that the walls, floor, and ceiling should be well balanced, and especially how the width of the room can be viewed. When shooting indoors, it is difficult to keep a sufficient distance from the subject, and as a result, the portion taken up by the walls is large, and the ceiling and floor tend to be barely visible. Unfortunately, such a picture cannot be said to convey the space of the room. Also, standard lenses for most cameras are suited for shooting people, so the angle of view is too narrow for interiors. And even if the floor, wall, and ceiling are captured, the photo is inevitably dominated by the wall facing the photographer. Therefore, basically, a wide-angle lens is used for interior photography, which allows for a well-balanced image of the ceiling, floor, and walls. A lens that zooms from telephoto to wide angle tends to have spherical distortion at wide angles, so it is recommended to shoot with an interchangeable lens compact camera or SLR using a high-quality wide-angle lens. Finally, regarding the amount of light at the time of shooting, we will look here at how the building is exposed to light and what kind of light is required. When shooting, it is important to keep in mind the appropriate amount of light. When taking a photo of the exterior, check the position and condition of the sun, and avoid shooting from where the sun is directly behind the subject, that is, a backlit position. Select a position that does not result in backlighting and shoot. Also, even if there is no backlighting, in some cases, use equipment such as a photo umbrella to adjust the amount of light appropriately in order to shoot. Modern cameras set the aperture and shutter speed automatically, but if you know how to set these manually, you can adjust the exposure according to the situation to take good pictures. If the backlit position is most suitable for shooting the building exterior, wait for the sun to go behind a cloud before shooting. Alternatively, you can also wait for the sun to move before shooting. However, these methods are affected by the weather, so you need to have ample time in your schedule. Even if there is no problem with the position and condition of the sun, depending on the shape of the building, there may be strong shadows, such as under the eaves, and in some cases, these will appear black. Even in this case, if you have knowledge about photo equipment, you can use the appropriate items, adjust the amount of light and the camera settings, and take good pictures. Knowledge of photo equipment is especially important when shooting inside a building. Since the shape inside of the building is complex, bright and dark places, near and far places will be mixed in one photo. Also, since there isn't much space, positions for taking pictures are limited. Therefore, it is necessary to select photo equipment according to the situation, such as using a strobe to partially adjust the amount of light. Also, when shooting inside, pay attention to the different shape and light conditions, such as the size and placement of each room, window size, how the light enters, and respond appropriately to each situation. Finally, I will conclude the lecture with concrete examples of photography in architectural heritage documentation. Let's look at a case of a comprehensive survey to assess surviving examples of Japanese-style architecture built from the mid-19th to mid-20th centuries. The agency conducting the survey was the Tottori Prefectural Board of Education, and the primary survey was carried out by the local municipal and town boards of education, with the secondary survey commissioned to the Nara National Research Institute for Cultural Properties. This survey report contains basic information and photographs of properties from the primary survey, which are usually given only as lists. These photos were taken by local government staff of the communities where the properties are located. Here, I would like to enlarge and compare two photographs of houses of the same architectural style. In the photo on the left, the entire front of the building is shown without any obstacles, and both ends of the roof ridge are shown. So, you can imagine the shape of the entire building with this one photo. In the photo on the right, both ends of the building are cut off, and another building is on the left. So it is not possible to view the shape of the entire building from this photo alone. The main reason is that the shooting position is too close to the subject. So, the photo would be a little better just by being aware of the position from where it is taken. Let's compare two more pictures of other houses. In the photo on the left, the photographer's awareness of shooting position can be seen in that the entire image of the building is captured, while avoiding the cars parked in front. It would be better if the cars weren't there, but in a simple survey, with insufficient time and personnel, it is important to just select the best possible position and take the picture. But the photo on the right is more of a problem, because it was taken without any concern about the people and things in front of the building. The impression given by a photo can be greatly improved by just having people get out of the picture and clearing out things that can be easily moved. These two are pictures of main shrine buildings. Highly commemorative buildings such as these are often protected by a covering structure to shield the building from the weather. In this case, since the subject is the shrine, you have to find some way to avoid the cover. The photo on the left was taken by selecting a position where just a portion of the shrine is visible from the outside. But while the shrine itself can be seen, the cover is too conspicuous. For the photo on the right, a position was taken with the shrine showing large and lit with a strobe, but the position is too close, and the lower part is cut off, and the shrine roof is also no longer visible. In such a small and restricted space, it is difficult to take good pictures without the appropriate equipment, just like in the room. Next are photos from secondary surveys. Here, 2 pages are assigned to each case, and there are 2 photos of the exterior, 3 of characteristic rooms, and a tea room as a separate building in the garden. Reading the description, you see that the photos were selected according to the characteristics of this property. Of these, let's enlarge the photo of the main building. There are many garden trees in the surrounding area, and it is difficult to capture the entire building in one photo. But they chose a place where the garden trees are as thin as possible and managed to include both ends of the ridge of the roof. However, when it comes to the actual photograph, the portion covered by the garden tree is so large that it is difficult to see the edges of the subject, or tell whether the photograph is intended as the building or the garden. This is a photo of the same building, taken again on another day. It is from almost the same position, but by moving a little and shooting from a slightly higher position, it is a picture more tightly focused on the building. Let's look at another photo from a secondary survey. Here, there is a large drawing, so the photos are limited to 1 exterior view and 2 characteristic rooms. Let's enlarge the photos of these 2 rooms. Both have a narrow angle of view, so the area occupied by the wall is large. This has the most decorative part of a Japanese-style room, called tokogame. So from this wall, experts can imagine the room to some extent, but it cannot be said to convey the entire picture of the room. Also, there are things that could have been easily removed, such as a heater and some furniture. These are from another house, photos later retaken of the most characteristic rooms in the secondary survey. The angle of view is wide, and the rooms have been cleaned out. So, you can see how the entire image of the room is conveyed at a glance when the picture is taken like this. Next, let's look at an example of an individual survey. We will first take up a historical building survey focused on the Takemura family residence in Kochi Prefecture. This building is the residence of a sake brewer, built in the latter half of the 18th century. One characteristic feature is that although it is a merchant's house, it was allowed to have a magnificent front gate that is normally only seen in a samurai residence. Another feature is that it is a full-scale 2-story building, which was rare for non-samurai residences then. This single photo clearly shows these architectural features. The Takemura family residence has 3 buildings lined up side by side to form a single compound, so it is not possible to fit all of it into one photo. This is the exterior of the shop where they conducted sales. The higher roof behind it is the 2-story dwelling, so the composition of the photo clearly shows the overall shape of the shop and its connection with the residence to one side. This is the exterior of the two-story residential building. You can see the depth because the entire roof ridge is included. The shop can be seen to the rear, connected with a tatami room building to its front. The gate is also visible, but you can see that it stood out more in the previous photo taken from the front. This is a photo of the rear of the tatami room building. We tend to forget to take pictures of such inconspicuous areas, but being careful to shoot all visible parts of the exterior in an investigation is important. This is the inside of the shop. Among traditional Japanese architectural spaces, this type of area, having small roof frame members darkened with soot, is particularly difficult to shoot. However, even in such spaces, by adjusting the camera settings appropriately and taking pictures with the necessary equipment, it is possible to take pictures that convey, like this, the characteristics of the space at a glance. This is a photo of the entrance to the tatami room building. In the interior space of a traditional house, characteristic designs and sculpted enhancements are concentrated around tatami rooms. This is a photo of the central part of the tatami room building. The flow of space leading from the waiting room to the inner guest room and the garden beyond is a feature of these tatami rooms. This photo shows this feature well by opening the shoji screens at the back of the guest room, making the garden visible from the waiting room. This is a photo of the second floor of the residential building. Since it is a space for everyday use, there is little decoration, making it difficult to bring out the features. But, by using the same composition as the previous tatami room photo, the contrast in character between the tatami room building and the residential building is brought out. Next, we take up an individual survey of a historical building focused on the Fukuzawa family residence in Nagano Prefecture. This was built in the middle of the 19th century as the residence of a merchant whose livelihood was distributing local products. As you can see, this is an exemplary photo of the exterior, showing the height, width, and depth of the building. This is an exterior photograph of the rear side. With only two photos, this and the previous one, the entire image of the building has been captured. This is a picture of the inside of the building and the hall that is the center of daily life. In such a room, various utensils for daily living are often placed. But taking a photo after clearing away these things, the characteristics of the space can be seen well. It may not be possible to clear everything away like this, but if you are conscious of the photo you want to take and clean up as much as you can, it can change significantly how the photo comes out. This is a picture of the living area. The Buddhist altar, built as part of the wall, and the ceiling show the structural members as they are. Gives an atmosphere of a room for everyday use. Also, by opening the shoji screen to take the picture, the relationship between the room, the veranda, and the garden can be clearly understood. This is a photo of the guest room. Similar to the Takemura family residence, it has the characteristic tatami room spatial flow from the waiting room to the guest room to the back garden. In this photo, all the sliding doors are removed, so the picture captures the size of the tatami rooms, and in particular, the height of the ceiling and the entire sequence. This is the interior of the second floor. The three walls, floor, and ceiling are well balanced in the photo, and the low ceiling and the finish of the floorboards clearly show the spatial characteristics of the second floor, not used as a room for living in. Let's take a brief look at individual surveys of traditional townscapes. This is a survey of the castle town of Takeyama in Gifu Prefecture. Since the townscape is larger and more diverse in form than a single building, there are various ways to take pictures. But one of the basics is to capture the relationship between the street and buildings as shown here, by including some of the buildings on the opposite side of the street from the line of structures you mainly want to shoot, in this case the house seen at the right edge of the photo. You can indicate the characteristics of the road by showing its width. As with single buildings, it is important to take care that people and objects do not obscure the buildings as much as possible. However, for townscapes, it takes more time and effort to have people and objects removed than for a single building. It is also effective to take a picture of the houses from a high position, as shown here. Another advantage of this method is that it shows the relationship with the surrounding terrain, such as nearby mountains, forests, and rivers. Next is an individual survey of a traditional townscape in the hot spring town of Unotsu in Shimane Prefecture. This is a photo of the center of the hot spring town. The spatial characteristics of such a town, like the townscape formed in a narrow valley with the main buildings of shops and inns lined up along the street, and a hostel to accommodate hot spring guests built to the rear, are well indicated. This is a photo of shops lined up along the street. Since the subject is the townscape, the advertisements placed along the street have been cleared away, but the shop signboards are included in the photo to an appropriate degree to give the atmosphere of a shopping street. A portion of the signboards were thus intentionally left uncleared. In the case of a townscape, the town's function, such as Hot Spring Town, often constitutes the value of the heritage. This photo was taken of a series of signs lit up in a hot springs town at dusk, and such a photo showing the activities of the town is also an effective way to convey the value of the heritage. The hot spring town of Unotsu developed as one of the shipping ports for the Iwami Ginzan silver mine, a World Heritage Site. The photo at left is a picture of the mine shaft posted on the Iwami Ginzan travel guide website. As photos for a designation survey, one of the effective means is to use impressive photographs that show the historical background of these towns. The photos used for travel guides are selected to be eye-catching, so they are helpful as a reference when considering photos for a designation survey. This picture of Takeyama is posted on the website of the world-famous travel guide Lonely Planet. By combining the snowy landscape with the lighting of the streets, it gives the atmosphere of a historic townscape located in a mountain setting. Travel guides that introduce Takeyama often use photographs of traditional festivals set in towns like this. The comprehensive preservation and utilization of not only architectural heritage, but also a variety of cultural heritage in the same region, such as traditional performing arts and cultural landscapes, is one trend in the realm of cultural heritage protection in recent years. Finally, let's take a look at a World Heritage nomination for examples of photographs from a designation survey. This is the cover of the Historic Monuments of Ancient Nara nomination file. The photo shows the Great Buddha Hall of Todaiji Temple in the center, the 5-storied pagoda of Kofukuji Temple in the distance, and the cherry blossoms in full bloom in the foreground, giving a strong impression of the atmosphere of Japan. At the same time, many photographs of such a model building are used in the nomination file. This is another photograph of the exterior of the Great Buddha Hall at Todaiji Temple. This is a picture of the inside of the Great Buddha Hall. This photograph captures the structure surrounding the statue of the main Buddha, the Great Buddha, from a wide angle of view. If you look at the travel guides of Todaiji Temple in recent years, many photos related to religious events, such as this one, are being used. This is a scene of a ceremony using a torch called the Shuni I Hongyo, which is held in a building called Nikatsudo. The trend for preferring photographs focusing on activities that take place at these architectural heritage sites is also evident in photographs of traditional streets, which serve as living spaces. These are the photos published in a guidebook of townscape preservation districts designated by the Japanese government. At left is the Tea House district in Kanazawa City, Ishikawa Prefecture, and at right is the silkworm raising village at Shirakawa in Gifu Prefecture. Pictures of weddings in traditional folk houses like this, and photographs of the roofs of traditional folk houses being rethatched by a group of residents are also frequently used. In light of the recent trend of cultural heritage protection, it will become more and more important to use photographs showing such lively activities being conducted with the architectural heritage as the stage, especially for photographs for designation and registration. This is the end of the lecture. Thank you for your attention.